I never thought I'd be telling this story. I thought, like most people, that my life was the kind of thing that happened to other people. Those dramatic, gut-wrenching tales you hear at bars, on the news, or read about in books. A life with its ups and downs, sure, but never anything that could rip you to pieces from the inside out. I had a good marriage, or so I thought. Her name was Emma. Beautiful, smart, compassionate, funny, the kind of woman everyone admires. I was the lucky guy. We met in college, and even though we were different in many ways, we clicked. She was the center of my world. I didn't have many friends back then, but Emma was my best friend, my confidant, the one person who always had my back. When we got married, I thought I'd made the best decision of my life. We bought a house, settled into our routine, and even talked about having kids one day. I always felt secure, like there was no force in the world that could come between us. Even when life got stressful, we had a rhythm. The little things, like her laugh after a terrible joke, or the way she'd always steal the last bite of my dessert, kept me grounded. But you can never really know what's lurking beneath the surface, can you? It started with something small, almost insignificant. She seemed a little distant one evening. We'd just gotten back from a family event, nothing fancy, just to get together with her side of the family. We were laughing in the car on the way back, but I noticed she wasn't quite as engaged in the conversation. She seemed distracted. I didn't think much of it at first. It could have been anything. Maybe she was tired or stressed from work. But then it happened again the next week. And the week after that, I began noticing changes. She was taking longer with her phone, always typing quickly, always hiding the screen when I walked by. She'd say she was going out with friends, but something about the way she said it felt off. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. It was that feeling, you know? That nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I don't know why, but I ignored it. Maybe I didn't want to face the reality of what could be happening. Maybe I thought I was just paranoid, imagining things. I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't want to lose what we had. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. And then came the night I'd never forget. It was a Friday evening, and I had just wrapped up a late shift at work. I was exhausted, ready to collapse on the couch and watch a mindless movie. When I walked in the door, Emma wasn't there. Her car was gone, and there was no note. It wasn't unusual for her to go out, but something about it unsettled me. I called her phone. It rang a few times, and then went straight to voicemail. I paced the apartment, my mind racing. Maybe she was with friends. Maybe she was just busy. But why hadn't she called? Why hadn't she texted? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, staring at the clock on the wall as the hours dragged by. By the time it was 2 a.m., I was awake, consumed with a feeling I couldn't shake. I needed to know where she was. I didn't know why, but something told me to check her phone. Emma wasn't one to keep secrets, but something about this was pulling me in that direction. I found her phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked, waiting for me. It took just a second to see it. A single text message from an unknown number. No greeting, just a time, a place, and a simple message. Can't wait to see you tonight. I don't know what made me do it, but I grabbed my keys. Without thinking, I left the apartment and drove toward the address in the text. It wasn't far, just a hotel on the edge of town. A place we'd passed 100 times, but never thought twice about. My heart was in my throat as I pulled into the parking lot. I couldn't bring myself to get out of the car. My mind was spinning, my thoughts a whirl of confusion and fear. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who's paranoid, who overreacts. But deep down, I knew I had to see this through. I watched the entrance for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something, anything, that would make sense of what was going on. And then I saw her. I saw her. I'd know her anywhere, even in the dim glow of the hotel's neon lights. Emma stepped out of a car, her hair down, wearing a black dress that I'd never seen before, one that looked far too dressy for a casual night out with friends. My heart dropped to my stomach as I watched her walk toward the entrance of the hotel. I felt frozen, stuck in that moment, unable to breathe. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around and drive away, to pretend like I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't. I had to know. I had to see with my own eyes what was happening. She walked up to the door, and then, as if in slow motion, Another figure emerged from the shadows. It was my brother, Jason. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But no, there was no mistake. It was him. My older brother, the guy I'd grown up with, the one who'd always been my protector, my best friend, the one I'd shared secrets with and confided in through the years. He wasn't just a face in the crowd. He was my brother. And there he was, with my wife, standing at the entrance of a hotel, looking like they were about to walk inside together. He put his arm around her, pulling her close, and I felt like I had just been punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I watched as they spoke to each other in low voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way they were standing, so comfortable, so familiar, told me everything I needed to know. My mind reeled, trying to piece together the fragments of the last few months, all those little things I'd brushed aside as nothing. This is it. This is what's been going on. My brother and my wife. The betrayal of it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, crushing me. I wanted to scream, to run to them and demand an explanation, but my legs felt like lead, and all I could do was sit there in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. It didn't take long for them to go inside. Jason held the door open for Emma, and she walked in, her head tilted back slightly as she laughed at something he'd said. I couldn't look away. I didn't know how to move. My body felt numb, like I was trapped in a dream I couldn't wake up from. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. My brother, of all people. I never would have imagined in a million years that he could be the one to do this, that he would be the one to betray me in the worst way possible. I couldn't comprehend it. It was a sick joke, a nightmare I couldn't escape. After what felt like an eternity of staring at the hotel's front doors, I finally managed to shift the car into reverse and pull away from the parking lot. My hands were still shaking, and I wasn't sure how I even managed to drive. The road ahead of me was a blur, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles per hour, trying to piece together something, anything, that could make sense of this. I drove aimlessly for a while, until I found myself parked in front of a small diner on the outskirts of town. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. Not until I figured out what the hell was going on. I sat there in the car for what felt like hours, my hands still trembling, my mind too clouded with disbelief to even think clearly. I kept seeing the image of Emma and Jason together, her laughing, his arm around her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, like an image burned into my brain. How long had this been going on? Were they planning this the entire time? The thought of Emma, the woman I'd married, being with my brother behind my back made me sick. It twisted something inside me, a feeling I didn't know how to process. I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't just angry. I was completely destroyed. I couldn't go back to my apartment. Not yet. I needed time. I needed answers. Eventually, I forced myself to leave the car and walk into the diner. It felt like a lifetime ago since I had felt normal. The waitress smiled at me as I sat down, but I couldn't bring myself to smile back. I felt like I was living in someone else's life, like I was just playing a role in a story that wasn't mine. I ordered a coffee, but I couldn't even bring myself to drink it. My mind kept going back to that hotel, to Emma and Jason. Were they still in there? Were they? No. I didn't want to think about it. I couldn't. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this go. I had to find out everything. And once I did, I would make sure they both felt the weight of what they'd done. The next few days were a blur. I don't remember much of what happened, honestly. I went through the motions of work, of life, but I was somewhere else, lost in a haze. I couldn't shake the image of them together. My brother, the guy who knew all my secrets, the one I trusted more than anyone else. And Emma, the woman I had built my life around. The woman I had pledged to love and protect. How could they do this to me? How long had it been going on? I didn't confront them. Not yet. I knew I had to be smart about it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew that I couldn't just blow up and let my emotions get the best of me. I'd learned that much in life. Emotions are messy, and they cloud your judgment. But the thing about betrayal is that it's different. It doesn't just shake you, it shatters you. And that shattering left me raw, exposed. I spent the next few days obsessing over the smallest details. I checked my phone, replaying the text I had found on Emma's screen. The time. the place. Everything about it felt like a punch in the gut. Can't wait to see you tonight. What did that even mean? Was she in love with him? Was this more than just some reckless affair? I hated myself for not having noticed sooner, for not seeing the signs. But I couldn't change any of that now. I did the only thing I could think of. I followed them. I didn't even feel guilty about it. Why should I? It wasn't like they'd given me a choice. I knew it was crazy. I knew it was unhealthy. But I needed answers. I needed to see what was really going on. I couldn't just sit around pretending that everything was fine while they were living some twisted double life behind my back. So, on the third day after seeing them together at the hotel, I followed Emma. She had no idea I was watching. I kept my distance, making sure she didn't spot me as I tailed her from the coffee shop she'd gone to that morning, down to the boutique she loved. I watched as she casually chatted with the shopkeeper, as if everything in her world was perfectly normal. But nothing about this felt normal to me. She was carefree, at ease, like the weight of what she had done hadn't even touched her. That's what really tore me up. The fact that she could walk around like nothing had happened. She was still the woman I'd married, still the woman I had shared my hopes and dreams with, and yet, this wasn't her. The Emma I knew would never do something like this. But the truth was, I didn't know her anymore. I saw her walk into the grocery store around 2 p.m., and I decided it was time to make my move. I pulled into a parking spot across the street, out of sight, but close enough to keep an eye on her. I sat in the car for what seemed like forever, my fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I knew this wasn't just about Emma. It was about everything. The trust, the betrayal, the years I'd spent thinking I had the perfect marriage. All of it had come crashing down. And now, I had to make sense of it all. As I sat there in the car, my phone buzzed. I glanced down, half expecting it to be Emma or Jason, but it wasn't. It was a text from my best friend, Matt. "You okay, man? You've been quiet lately." It struck me in a strange way. Matt knew me better than anyone. He had been there through thick and thin. But I couldn't tell him what was happening. I couldn't tell anyone. Who could I trust now? I didn't respond. I didn't feel like talking. Not to anyone. But something inside me snapped when I looked up and saw Emma talking to another man. A tall, well-dressed guy with dark hair and a charming smile. They were laughing together, and I could see the way he was looking at her. The same way Jason had looked at her at the hotel. That was it. The floodgates opened. I wasn't just going to be a passive observer anymore. I had to confront her. I couldn't let this slide. But I also knew I wasn't ready to face her yet. I needed more answers. I needed to understand everything. Because I was done being in the dark. As I turned the car off, a plan began to form. It wasn't a plan of revenge, not yet. But I needed to dig deeper. I needed to make them both feel what I was feeling. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal really went. I followed her again, a few hours later, when she left the store. This time, I didn't hide. I didn't try to stay invisible. I wasn't ashamed anymore. I was a man on a mission. I tailed her to a secluded part of town, to a different hotel. A different one. And there, in the parking lot, I saw him again. Jason, the man who was supposed to have my back. My brother. The one I trusted to watch out for me. He was standing outside, waiting for her. And this time, I didn't wait. I got out of the car. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my mind was clear. There was no turning back now. This wasn't about making sense of everything. It was about taking control. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I walked toward the hotel entrance. The cool night air felt like a slap in the face, but I didn't flinch. I had come too far to back out now. As I approached, I saw them, together, laughing, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. I didn't call out. I didn't confront them right there in the open, but I knew what I had to do next. Everything was about to change. I don't know how I managed to walk into that hotel lobby without completely losing it. My heart was still pounding in my chest, each step feeling like a drumbeat echoing in my ears, but my mind was laser-focused on one thing. Them. Emma and Jason. The two people who were supposed to love me, to have my back, and here they were, laughing together, completely oblivious to the hell I was about to unleash. I walked past the front desk, trying to appear casual, but I could feel my hands shaking. I glanced over at the elevator and saw them both waiting in the corner, heads close, still talking like they had all the time in the world. Emma's eyes sparkled in a way I'd never seen before, not when she was with me. There was a warmth between them that made me feel like an outsider in my own life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull her away from him and demand to know why, how, when. But no, I had to be smart. I had to make sure I was in control. I took a deep breath, calming myself. No point in making a scene just yet. The confrontation would come, but it had to be on my terms. I had to be the one in charge of this moment. I waited until the elevator doors closed behind them, then followed. The hallway on the second floor was quiet, with only the faint hum of the lights above. I could hear their voices, low, too intimate. They were in some sort of world of their own, a world I wasn't part of anymore. My stomach churned as I approached their room. I wasn't sure how I'd planned this part out in my head, but here I was. I was standing at the door to their room, the room that they'd been sharing behind my back. I could feel the weight of it, the betrayal, the rage that had been building up inside me for days, now finally bubbling to the surface. They didn't hear me at first, which gave me a few extra seconds to think. Should I knock? Burst in? Wait for them to notice me? I couldn't wait anymore. I took a deep breath and knocked hard on the door. For a moment, nothing. The silence felt suffocating. Then, I heard a muffled voice from inside, Emma's voice, asking who it was. She sounded surprised. And in that moment, I felt a sick rush of power. She didn't know it was me. She didn't know that I had seen everything, that I had followed her, that I had seen her with my brother. I was ready to shatter everything she thought she knew about her perfect little world. I knocked again, this time louder. The door creaked open, and there they were. Emma, standing in front of me, her eyes wide, her face flushed. She looked beautiful, even now, like nothing had happened, like we were just two strangers meeting by chance. But her face shifted when she saw me. The color drained from her cheeks as recognition hit. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't need to. I was still processing the shock of it all. But it was all there in my eyes. The hurt, the anger, the disbelief. Everything she had done to me was written on my face. It took her a few seconds, but she finally opened her mouth, stammering, "How did you? What are you doing here?" Her voice was a mixture of confusion and guilt, and I could see her scrambling for an explanation. The words felt hollow as she continued to speak, each one only digging the hole deeper. She had nothing to say that would make this okay. But then my eyes moved past her to Jason, who was standing behind her. He looked just as shocked, his face slowly turning from pale to crimson. The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. It was him, my brother, the man who was supposed to have my back, the man I trusted above anyone else. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. What the hell is this? My voice came out in a strained whisper, barely able to hold back the fury that had been building in me for days. They didn't answer right away. Jason opened his mouth, but no words came out. Emma looked like she wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish. But she couldn't. Not this time. I took a step forward, my fists clenched at my sides. I couldn't help it. Every part of me wanted to lash out, to strike them both for what they'd done to me. But I kept it together. Barely. You. I choked on the words. You both. I couldn't even finish the sentence. I just stared at them, hoping they could feel the weight of the betrayal hanging in the air between us. Finally, it was Emma who broke the silence. She swallowed hard and stepped back, her eyes darting between me and Jason. "I'm sorry, okay?" She trailed off, looking for something to say that might make it better. But there was nothing. "Sorry?" I repeated, incredulous. "Sorry for what? For destroying everything?" I turned to Jason, who was still frozen in place, unable to move. I could feel my entire body shaking with the force of my anger, but I wasn't done yet. I had to know. I needed to understand. "How long?" I demanded, my voice barely a whisper, but sharp as a blade. "How long has this been going on?" Emma glanced at Jason, as if waiting for him to speak, but he remained silent, his face twisted with shame. "Answer me," I shouted. Jason flinched but still didn't say anything. Emma opened her mouth to speak, But I cut her off. "Don't you dare lie to me," I spat. "You owe me the truth, both of you." And that's when it all came spilling out. "Since last year," Emma said, barely above a whisper, her eyes downcast. We've been seeing each other for months now." The words hit me like a freight train. I couldn't even process them at first. A part of me couldn't believe what I was hearing, but the rest of me knew it was true. It was all true. I didn't even know what to say after that. All I could do was stand there, trying to keep my composure, but feeling like the ground beneath me was crumbling away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit something, break something, burn it all down. But I was done with the yelling, done with the pleading. They were the ones who had to face the consequences of what they'd done. I looked at Jason, my brother, and for the first time, I didn't see family. I didn't see the person who had been there for me all these years. I saw a traitor, and he deserved every ounce of the hell that was about to come. I didn't need to say anything else. The silence between us was all I needed. I turned and walked out, not looking back. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't say a word as I walked out of the hotel. The whole thing felt unreal, like I was in some sort of twisted dream I couldn't wake up from. I was still shaking, my hands clammy from the weight of everything I had just learned. I could feel the anger building, my thoughts a whirlwind of rage and betrayal. But there was something else too, something darker, something I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. Revenge. It was the only thing that kept repeating in my head. I didn't know what form it would take yet, but I knew I couldn't let this go. They had crossed a line, and they both needed to feel the consequences. As I walked back to the car, I tried to focus, tried to force myself to think logically. But all I could see was Emma's face, the guilt, the lies. And Jason, my brother, my family, the man who had stood beside me through everything. It wasn't just a betrayal of my wife anymore. It was the loss of my entire world. The rug had been pulled out from under me, and I had no idea how to put it all back together. I drove for hours that night, not really knowing where I was going, just wanting to be far away from them. I didn't want to go home, not yet. Not with all the memories of Emma there, the good ones and the bad. My mind kept racing, the reality of what I had seen and heard replaying over and over again. Last year, that's when it started. Months. I couldn't believe it. How could they hide something so big from me for so long? I felt betrayed, yes, but also humiliated. They had both treated me like a fool. It wasn't until I was sitting in a small diner, an hour away from the city, that I finally stopped. I stared out the window into the night, watching the rain streak down the glass. I felt empty, hollow. The pain inside me was all-consuming, like a deep wound that wouldn't heal. But I had to be strong. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let her win. I texted Matt that night, asking if we could talk. I didn't tell him what had happened. I couldn't. But I needed someone. Someone who wasn't involved. I needed to be around someone who still saw me as I was, not as the broken man who had just caught his wife and brother in the most devastating betrayal imaginable. Matt didn't ask any questions. He was there within the hour. We met at a small bar, and I didn't have to say much. Matt could tell something was wrong just from looking at me. I don't know how, but he always knew. I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I spent the next hour venting, ranting, tearing myself apart in ways I hadn't even expected. "I don't know what to do anymore," I said, burying my face in my hands. "It feels like everything's crashing down." Matt didn't try to offer advice at first. He just listened. That's what I needed. I needed someone to listen, because nothing else made sense. "I'm so angry, man," I continued, my voice breaking. "I'm fury inside. But I don't know what to do with it." Matt put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it gently. He wasn't looking at me with pity or judgment. He was just there, like he always had been. "You'll figure it out. Just take your time. You don't have to make any decisions right now." But I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let them get away with it. I had to make them feel the pain I was feeling. Both of them, Emma and Jason. And it wasn't going to be some petty revenge. It was going to be something deep, something that would shake them to their core. For the first time in days, I began to feel a little more clear-headed. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that this pain, that the world I'd built, this life I had trusted, needed to be paid for. The next few days were a blur of planning. I had 1,000 different ideas, all of them dark, all of them about making them regret what they'd done. The problem wasn't that I didn't know what to do. It was that I did know, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to go that far. Matt had no idea what was coming. He was just trying to help me hold it together, which I appreciated. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was something I had to handle on my own. The thought of confronting Emma again twisted my stomach. I couldn't look her in the eyes without seeing the lies she'd told, the way she betrayed me so effortlessly. But it wasn't just her. It was Jason, the man I'd always looked up to, my older brother, the one I'd trusted with everything. I wasn't sure how I was going to confront them again, but I had to. There was no other option. I started to make calls, talk to a few friends, to a few people who knew Jason better than I did. I wanted to learn everything about how long this had been going on, what had been said between them, and just how deep the betrayal went. I needed all the pieces of the puzzle, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. The more I learned, the worse it got. Emma wasn't just sleeping with Jason. They had been planning to be together for months. They had even talked about a future, something I never thought was possible, never thought they'd have the nerve to do. But they had, and that made everything worse. I couldn't just be angry anymore. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about my entire life being ripped apart by the two people I had loved and trusted the most. I didn't care if it took months, or if I lost everything. I was going to make them pay. And when I did, they would feel it. Every day. Until they understood exactly what they had done. But first, I had to confront them again. I had to see their faces one last time. And that's when I came up with my plan. I wasn't a guy who thought about revenge much. I was the type to let things go, to move on, to focus on the bigger picture. But there's something about betrayal that twists your sense of right and wrong, something that drives you to the edge. And that's where I was now, on the edge, trying to piece together a plan that would make Emma and Jason truly understand what they'd done. It wasn't going to be some grand gesture or confrontation. I didn't want to yell, to scream, or to make a scene. I wanted them to feel the weight of it, to feel the consequences of their actions in a way that left them with a lasting imprint. I had already started gathering details. I'd reached out to some of Jason's friends, people who knew about the affair but hadn't said anything. Some of them were willing to talk, others weren't. But I pieced together enough information. They had been seeing each other at least since last summer, planning trips together, even talking about moving in. The worst part? Jason had known Emma was unhappy with me for months before this affair started. He knew, and yet he chose to betray me. I also began collecting details about Emma's life, her bank statements, her texts, even her social media interactions. I knew it was invasive. It felt wrong. But they had invaded my life, my trust. They had taken something that wasn't theirs to take, and now it was my turn to take something back. I spent the next few days setting things in motion. I needed them both to face what they'd done, and I needed to be the one who delivered that justice. The first step was making Emma believe I was still in the dark. I couldn't confront her yet, not until I was ready, but I knew I had to get Jason alone first. He was the key to everything, the man I trusted more than anyone else. So, I made a plan to get him on his OW and IT. Didn't take much to get Jason alone. He wasn't the type to think twice about hanging out with me, even after everything that had happened. I wasn't sure if he knew how to feel about the whole situation, or if he was just ashamed and trying to avoid me. Either way, I used that. I invited him out for a drink one evening, under the guise of wanting to talk things out. He didn't ask why. I guess he assumed I just wanted to vent, to hash things out like we always had. He was clueless. He had no idea that this wasn't just about a couple of beers and a bro talk. This was about making him face the reality of what he'd done. When we met at the bar, I kept it casual. I didn't show him anything that I knew. I didn't confront him yet. I let him talk about his life, his job, his stupid little stories. I pretended everything was fine. I even laughed at some of his dumb jokes, trying to keep him comfortable, trying to make him think that everything was going to be okay. But inside, I was boiling. I had to keep it together for just a little while longer. Around the time we finished our second round, I finally asked him about her, about Emma. I casually mentioned how things had been weird between us lately. I wanted to see how he'd react, how he'd respond to the topic without me directly accusing him. But he faltered. His eyes shifted away. For a split second, I could see the guilt in them, but he quickly covered it up with a laugh. Man, relationships are complicated, you know, he said, swirling his drink. It's just life, I guess. I leaned in, locking eyes with him. Life, huh? I said, letting the silence hang between us. What's so complicated about it? You're supposed to have my back, right? Jason stiffened. He clearly wasn't ready for this, but I wasn't done. I thought I knew you, man, I continued, keeping my voice low, but pointed. I thought we were tight, but turns out, I don't know a damn thing. He went pale. I could see his mind working, trying to figure out where I was going with this. And that's when I dropped the bomb. Since last year, I said softly. How long, Jason? How long has it been? His face went white. He sputtered, trying to get words out, but they were just empty sounds. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he muttered, I didn't want to hurt you, man. That was it. The truth came spilling out in broken sentences. How they'd been seeing each other for months, how they'd planned on moving in together, how everything had started because Emma had felt distant and Jason wanted to be there for her. As if that justified any of it. As if he was the better man for sleeping with my wife. I stayed silent as he babbled, letting the full weight of his guilt hit him. His words meant nothing. He could explain, apologize, but it didn't matter. He had made his choice. When he finally stopped talking, I looked at him and said, I think you owe me something. Jason sat there, staring into his drink, too ashamed to look me in the eye. I could tell he was waiting for me to react, waiting for me to yell, to cry, to do something that showed I was hurt. But I was beyond that now. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I just nodded, letting the silence stretch on. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unable to handle the weight of what he'd done. But there was no pity in me, no sympathy. I had been betrayed in the worst way possible. There was no coming back from this. You're not the brother I thought you were, I said finally, my voice cold. You're nothing but a liar, just like her. His face dropped, his eyes watering with regret, but it was too late for apologies. There was no going back. After a long, awkward pause, I stood up. I'm done with this. Jason didn't try to stop me. He knew there was nothing left to say. Once I had Jason's confession, everything fell into place. I knew what I had to do next. I had to make Emma face what she had done, to confront her with the full weight of her betrayal. But I wasn't going to do it right away. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking this was just some knee-jerk reaction. No, I was going to make her wait, make her squirm, make her feel the impending dread of what was coming. I'd spent the past few days building the perfect storm. I called in favors, reached out to people I knew could help me get what I needed. I arranged for Jason's dirty little secrets to be exposed. I made sure everything would be public. No secrets, no way for them to hide. The pieces started to fall into place. I made sure Emma's social media accounts were monitored. Someone had to be the one to expose the cracks in her perfect little life. I wasn't just going to let them continue on like this, pretending like nothing happened. I also made sure to gather as much information as I could about her finances. I wanted to know how deep her lies went, how much of her life was built on deception. Emma wasn't going to get away with this. The day I decided to confront Emma again was the day everything started to feel like it was happening in real time. I could see the walls closing in on her. I could see how she would react once she knew what I knew. I wasn't going to hold back. This wasn't about healing. It wasn't about reconciliation. This was about making sure she never forgot what she did to me. I texted her that morning, asking her to meet me in the same spot where we'd shared so many memories. It wasn't the place I wanted to be, but it would serve its purpose. She agreed, without hesitation. I arrived early, sitting in the car and waiting, taking in the view of our old cafe, the one we used to visit all the time. I wondered if she remembered it the same way I did. When she walked in, looking surprised but composed, I knew she thought this was just going to be another calm conversation. But I had other plans. Emma sat down across from me, her eyes flicking nervously over my face. She had no idea what I was about to do. "Let's talk," she said, offering a weak smile, the same smile that had once melted my heart. But now, it felt like a mask, like a lie. Talk? I repeated. About what? About how you betrayed me with my brother. Her face went pale. The color drained from her skin, and for a moment, I saw the panic in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I know everything, Emma. Everything. I leaned forward. You and Jason. How long it's been going on. How you've been lying to me this entire time. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there was none. This was the moment when her world was about to collapse, and I was the one who would make sure it did. I have to say this, Emma, I said, my voice steady, but my eyes burning with the fury I'd been holding in. You're going to feel everything you've put me through. And Jason, too. I'm going to make sure you both regret this for the rest of your lives. What followed was a silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emma sat there, frozen, unable to speak. I let her sit in that silence, let the weight of what I had said sink in. Because there was no going back now. She couldn't lie her way out of this. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots, messages between her and Jason, plans they'd made together, trips they'd taken. It was all there, in black and white. Her eyes widened in horror as she scrolled through the messages, her face flushed with shame. You think I wouldn't find out? I said quietly. I wasn't just sitting around. I was watching, gathering everything I could. Emma couldn't speak. She just stared at the screen, knowing that I had everything. I didn't just leave Emma with the texts. No, I made sure everyone would see. I posted the screenshots on her social media, just enough to make the people who needed to know understand the truth. She had tried to hide her betrayal, but I made sure there was no hiding from this. The fallout was immediate. The calls, the messages, the apologies from people who had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. It was chaos, and I watched it unfold, emotionless. When it was all done, when the public humiliation had been delivered, I confronted Jason one last time. He was crushed, broken, and defeated. He begged for forgiveness, but I wasn't in the mood for mercy. The trust was gone. In the end, I walked away from it all. The revenge, the pain, it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was free. I wasn't bound to them, to their lies and betrayal. I could rebuild my life. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine, and that was all I needed.